Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk with Dr. Shanessa Fenner. Of course, I'm Dr. Shanessa Fenner, and I'm very excited this evening because I have a very special guest here with me. I have the incomparable Reverend Dr. William Barber, who is the North Carolina's NAACP president. Welcome, Dr. Barber.
Thank you much. Glad to be with you. Glad to be here.
Okay, great. Why don't we first start off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, when I think it's a lot of pieces, moving parts in somebody's life. But I always start with my birth, because I was born 2 days after the March on Washington. My father did not go to the march because he was expecting me. My mother could not go, obviously, because she had actually gone into labor on the 27th, and then for some reason I slowed down. The doctor said I'd be born on the 28th. I say, and my family jokes about it, that I wanted to wait and see what was going to happen. After 250,000 black and white people got on the mall and before the Lincoln Memorial. That's the joke. But I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. And my father was a clergy. My mother was working in government and a church pianist. Now, why I say that is Indiana had begun to move toward desegregation of its schools. My parents made a decision about 4 years later after they got a call from E.V. Wilkins, who was in Washington County, North Carolina. He told my father, you need to come back home. My father was from here. He was from Eastern North Carolina. Because schools in North Carolina had not yet been desegregated in 1964, 10 years after Brown. 1968, 14 years after Brown. So my parents made a decision that they would leave the Midwest, come back to Eastern North Carolina, and enter their only child into segregated Southern public schools. My mother would take a job in a segregated school. My father took a job as a science teacher in a segregated school so that they could be a part of the group of teachers that would later integrate the public school system in 1969 and 70 in Washington County. I think about that a lot, that for me, civil rights is not just something that people do, it's something that my family was involved in a very real way. That was their contribution. That's how they responded to I Have a Dream on the March on Washington. They decided that they didn't have to come back to the South. My father could have stayed in Indianapolis. He was doing very well. He was doing very well as a pastor. My mother was doing very well in her job, but they made that decision. And so I grew up in Eastern North Carolina in a segregated schools. And I say that for your audience because a lot of times we think about segregation, especially young people, they think about somebody old. Well, I just turned 50, and I went to segregated kindergarten and first grade. Grew up in the public schools of Washington County, graduated. I was the first African American president of the student government of my high school. Well, let me tell you, actually, up until I got elected, they would elect a black and a white. And the white person would serve one semester and the black would serve the other. It was foolish. I was the first one elected straight out, and then went on to North Carolina Central.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's my school.
It's mine too.
Okay, undergrad?
Yes.
Okay, I was an Eagle, 1981-85, graduated public administration, became student government president there. That's why I also got involved in electoral politics. I worked with Reverend Jesse Jackson's campaign when he first ran in '84. Then I went to seminary at Duke, and then I've pastored 2 churches. The second one I'm pastoring now. I've been pastoring over 20 years. I've been involved in movement work ever since I was in college. In fact, earlier than that, because I was actually president of the Youth Council of the NAACP when Kelly Alexander was president, and Carolyn Coleman was the executive director of the North Carolina NAACP. So in some ways, my father's work, that work, I've always in some ways been involved in movement work.
Okay. What are some of the agenda items right now that the NAACP will be working on this year?
Well, I've had the privilege of serving as the chair of political action for the national board of the NAACP. While I've been president of the NAACP, I was elected 2 terms ago. And in that position, I chair the group that oversees all of the legislative action and all of the political activity and activism that the NAACP does. So I'm right in the heart, in the middle of that. And a few years ago, we in the NAACP decided that we needed to look at what are the game changers for this century. When the NAACP was founded 104 years ago, they had 8 agenda items, 8 areas that they felt like we had to work in. The North Carolina NAACP in 2007, we came up with a 14-point agenda. The National said we need an agenda. We need to be clear, not about personalities, about agenda. So here's what we believe are the things that we have to continue to fight for work in. Number one, economic sustainability, jobs, labor rights, and addressing poverty. That's a critical game-changing civil rights issue. Number two, educational equality for all children. Number three, health care for all and environmental justice, protecting Medicare, Medicaid, affordable health care, and protecting the environment, and protecting minorities from always being, their property being the dumping ground of toxins and other things that hurt us. Number four, addressing the continuing disparities in the criminal justice system based on race and class. And number five, expanding and protecting voting rights and equal rights for all citizens. We voted unanimously as a board that those are the five game changers. Those are the areas where we have to examine the racial disparities, examine the continuing discrimination and inequality, and work in those areas to change this country to live out its full promise of what it said on paper.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, out of those areas, Dr. Barber, which one would you say, if you can say, is the one that you're more passionate about?
Well, that's the interesting question, and that's the question we all get. And that's actually the question we don't answer in the NAACP. And the reason is because your hand has 5 fingers. Cutting one of them off, your hand doesn't function.
Exactly. I'd be distraught.
Right. But if you bring them all together, you form power. Okay. So, for instance, you can't be serious about economic justice, economic sustainability and poverty if you're not serious about educational equality. Well, you can't be serious about educational equality if you're not serious about economic justice and addressing poverty, because the schools that have the most trouble are high poverty, resegregated schools. You can't be concerned about jobs, you're not being concerned about health care, because sick people can't go to work. You can't be concerned about people furthering their education if you're not concerned about the disparities in the criminal justice system, because when we lock people down and arrest, as Michelle Alexander says in her book, The New Jim Crow, when you put 1.5 million black men in prison, most of them for nonviolent crimes, you're creating a new underclass. You know, when African Americans use 15% of drugs, but have 70% of the arrest, that's a problem, and it locks people out of economic sustainability, it locks them out of educational opportunity. And you can't be concerned about any of those things and not be concerned about voting, because voting is what shapes who you elect, and who you elect shapes the public policy that affects economic justice, education equality, health care, and dealing with disparities in the criminal justice system. So it's really hard to separate. And one of the things people need to know about the NAACP is not a one-issue organization. We've always been multi-issued and multifaceted. That's why our motto says that we are concerned about all aspects of inequality and discrimination.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Dr. Barber, how has it been dealing with the Republican supermajority, trying to collaborate and work with them, and how's that been?
I'm going to say something strange on your show. I really don't have a problem with Republicans. I know some good Republicans. My grandfather was a Republican. Eisenhower was a Republican when he fought for education was a matter of national defense. And when he appointed the Supreme Court justice that presided over the Brown versus Board of Education case, every Republican except 2 in 1964 voted for the Civil Rights Act, and then later on for this Voting Rights Act. A lot of people don't know that. Governor Holshouser, when he was a Republican, he fought for rural economic development. Even Governor Martin pushed for more money for education. I don't think we're dealing with Republicans. I think we're dealing with some people who have extremism on steroids. They're not Republicans. First of all, they can't be Republicans because Republicans are supposed to be conservative. But what the Constitution says, we're supposed to conserve justice. Our Constitution says when you get elected, you're supposed to do what is good for the good of the whole. Republicans that I've heard, they say that they believe in faith and in morality. Well, how do you hurt poor people and unemployed people and then claim that that's the moral thing to do? I believe this crowd that we are dealing with, now they did run under the title of Republican, but I met a lot of Republicans that are upset with them. I was in Mitchell County the other day, 99% white, 89% Republican. They sent for me. I first told them I'm not going up there because we never even had the NAACP in Mitchell County. I get up there, it's about 300 people. The chair of the party, Republican Party, has renounced the party. His daughter's been coming tomorrow Monday. Why? Because they said to me, these are Republicans, that when this legislature cut 500,000 people's ability to get Medicaid, just because they hate the president, $8 billion of our tax money that was already allotted. They said that's wrong. It's not Republican Democrat, it's just immoral. Because there's a lot of poor people up there in those mountains. When they cut 170,000 people's unemployment, that's just wrong, because there are a lot of there's 15% unemployment in the mountains, and they're down in this area, there are areas that are 15, 12, 13, 14% unemployment. I met at Mar Monday Republican who has cancer, who lost his job, who now lost his unemployment on June the 30th because of this crowd, is going to lose his house, lose his insurance. He doesn't know what he's going to do. When they raised taxes on 907,000 working people, they ended the earned income tax credit by raising their taxes so that they could give a tax cut to 23 families. When they've cut over $2 billion in public education in the last 2 years, and when they've attacked voting rights in every aspect you could, that's not republicanism. It's certainly not democracy. It is a form of extremism. It is immoral. I think these people are high on coke, K-O-C-H, Charles and Eddie Koch, David Koch, and they are drunk on Tea Party tea. They are trapped in an extreme ideology, and that's why right now in North Carolina, when the polls were done a few weeks ago, Morrow Monday is polling at nearly 50% approval. The Republican-led or the conservative extreme Tea Party-backed legislature is polling less than one out of I think it's something like 19%. So I'm trying to have a discussion, because the NAACP has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. I'm suggesting, and I said it to the governor, we asked him to be, if he was a moderate Republican, we could work with that. We've done it before. You know, we've had to stand up to ultra-conservative Democrats, and we didn't like them either. But this crowd is just extreme. I mean, even the Wall Street Journal, which is a conservative paper, has criticized this crowd. What's his name? Christensen? I don't know if you've ever, he writes in the News and Observer. He wrote an article, and I think he said the last time we've seen this kind of public policy was in the 1800s, a group of people called the mummies.
Wow.
I mean, you know, and when you look at this, Doctor, when you look at this, the last time we've seen this kind of attack on voting rights and on public education, the only thing is different is the violence. But the last time we've seen it was something like 1872, when people tried to turn back the Reconstruction, you know, of 1868. So this crowd, they claim, well, we're Republicans like the people that wrote the North Carolina's Constitution in 1870. No, you aren't, because those were Lincoln Republicans, and many of those people were black. And they wrote the Constitution guaranteeing voting rights, guaranteeing public education, guaranteeing equal protection. This crowd is an anomaly. I don't know what they are, but what I do know is they need a lot of prayer, and some of them, you know, we need some people. I can't tell folk to do it, but you know, people need to vote, and if voting will help them go somewhere where they can have time to pray and time to meditate, they need to let them go there.
Okay. Now, Dr. Barber, after you've said all of this, do you think people get it? You know, do you think because of the economy and the way things are going right now, that this situation, this turmoil that we're in right now, is going to make people, you know, turn out and vote next time?
Oh, no doubt. We're in a different. Let me tell you what. When we started out this year, most people didn't believe they would be this extreme. That's the first thing. Most North Carolinians are fairly good people. So they said they'll do 2 or 3 things, but they won't just go berserk. Well, they did. First 50 days was just terrible. They've been 180 days in that legislature, and they tried to turn the state 180 degrees in the wrong direction. When we went into the legislature with 17 of us, on April 29th because they had rolled out this regressive voting bill on Monday, Thursday during Holy Week. While we were remembering Bloody Sunday from 1965, they were rolling out a regressive voting bill. And we said, that's enough. We went in on April 29th, 17 of us, 10 people, 7 preachers, 10 people, one lady with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair. And we said, we're going to follow the Constitution and demand that they listen to us because the governor refused to meet with us, the speaker, the Senate leader. And we sang and we prayed and we talked about these 5 game changers and we talked about all the negative things they were doing. And they arrested the woman with cerebral palsy.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did. Put her in jail with me. They put her in a wheelchair and rolled her right out of there. And we all looked at ourselves and said, this is a mistake for them. And in 13 weeks, we saw 1,000 people almost go to jail. Not black people, not white people, not gay, not straight, not young, not old, just people. Mm-hmm. We had millionaires go to jail beside unemployed people. We had one lady that came and said, I have health insurance. She was quadriplegic. And she said, I have health insurance, but I'm here for all the people like me that don't have it. We had families go to jail, clergy, bishops. And we had thousands of people show up every Monday. The last rally we had in Raleigh was nearly 15,000 people showed up.
Wow.
15,000. But what made us know it was there was a movement and the people are not going to go back is the first Moral Monday out of Raleigh, we went to Mitchell County, where it was, as I said, 89% Republican, and the Republican chair renounced the party. And his daughter been organized for Moral Monday. The next day we went to Asheville, 10,000 people. Think about that. The NAACP leading a movement in the South. Asheville has less than 10% African Americans, and 10,000 people showed up. And we've had rally after rally across this state. On the 28th, the actual anniversary of March on Washington, we had 13 rallies in 13 different places at the same time across the state of North Carolina. It's never happened before, and all of them were packed according to their geographical area. So this is a different day. People are sick and tired of extremism. They are sick and tired of bullies with political office. They don't care whether they're Republican or Democrat. They are just sick and tired of people who use their power to hurt people. Our Constitution says, we hold it to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, the enjoyment of the fruit of their own labor, and the pursuit of happiness. And all political power comes from the people and should only be used for the good of the whole. And people can see what's going on. Last thing, Doc, when I was in a county, what's it, a county, St. Paul? St. Paul is a city.
I know what St. Paul's is.
And I got out of my truck one day because I went down there to get me some clothes from Joe Sugar. You know, I mean, I don't mean giving no advertising, but I like, you know. Get out of the car, and the 3 white men, they see me get out of the car. They said, that's him. And that's that Reverend Barber. And they start walking toward me. I said, oh, well, I don't know what's going down here. So I get on out of the car, got my little cane out of the car. You know, I'm nonviolent, my cane is not. No, I'm just teasing. Don't you, y'all hear me that. So they came up to, they said, are you Reverend Barber? I said, I am. And then the guy said, let me shake your hand. 3 white guys now in St. Paul. Said, I'm going to tell you one thing. Said, I didn't always know about the NAACP, and I didn't always like the NAACP, and I'm going to tell you what, I got to come up there to one of those Moral Mondays because you know what? My brother lost his job, and he needs his unemployment, and so-and-so in my family had, you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They have overreached. They've gone too far. And if people were apathetic, they're not apathetic anymore, which was one of the main reasons why we started Moral Monday and why we didn't frame it as a Democratic Moral Monday or Republican Moral Monday or a liberal Moral Monday or conservative Moral Monday. We said it's Moral Monday. It's about what's right and what's wrong, what's constitutional versus what's unconstitutional.
Okay. On another note, I hear that Ben is stepping down. Mm-hmm. Okay, he's stepping down.
Good friend of mine.
Okay. Who do you think would be a good candidate or a good person?
You.
Seriously, not a barber. What about a woman?
Well, I think the issue is not gender. I think, you know, I have two daughters.
Give us a chance.
Yeah, well, I think more than a chance, women have been at the forefront. You know, Ella Baker, if it wasn't for Ella Baker, you wouldn't have a North Carolina NAACP. If it wasn't for like Carolyn Coleman, who was executive director here in North Carolina. See, we're ahead of them. We had an executive director and CEO. Her name was Carolyn Q. Coleman, one of the best in the country, and still sits on the board. So, but even Carolyn would tell you, I think, that we should be first in all those things. Just like when we've had 3 women who were chair. But the issue right now for us, first of all of us are taking time to thank Ben for what he's done, and to thank him that he recognized early on what we were trying to do in this state, and he endorsed our attempt to build coalition 7 years ago, when we said we were going to do something state conference had never done. We were going to build a mighty coalition of 150 partners, black and white and young and old, because we recognize the only way you can change the South is you got to be engaged in fusion politics. So number one. Number two, as we thank him, we have to remember the NAACP, when you become president and CEO, you are a captain of a ship that has many sailors, many oars, and many sails. The genius of the NAACP is it's never been about a person. It's never been about one leader who pops in. The NAACP is built from the ground up. And that's how you build movements. You don't build movement from DC down. You build movement from Selma, Greensboro, Fayetteville up. And all of our state Congress presidents work for free. All of our branch presidents, like Jimmy Buxton here in the state, who's strong and powerful, one of our strongest branches, in fact, are people free. All of the members are volunteers. So whoever it is and whatever gender they are, they have to see themselves as a general of a vast army that has lasted 104 years, not as an individual. And they have to be clear about these 5 game changers. And they have to be clear that we have to build movements and not just have moments. You know, like we went to the March on Washington. That's good, a commemoration. But what we did here is we came back and said, let's take the dream home. Like Dr. King said, let's go back to the South and work. So whoever it is, and we got a lot of praying to do about that, but whoever becomes the president and CEO, male or female, must have a deep appreciation for the organization's volunteers, must work deeply with the state conference president, must be deeply, deeply committed to activism and this agenda, these game changers. And I believe must be a person who understands the fight for this nation's soul is in the South. Now, I'm not discounting all the other areas, but the Southern, if you break through the South and break through these Southern legislatures, where most of the attacks on voting rights are happening, where the demographics have shifted now, if you change the South, if you increase voter participation and registration in the South, and you break open the solid South that's had a hold on the South for the last 40 years, you change the country. You change the South, you change the nation, you change the public policy. And so I think whoever's going to has to have some clarity and would be a person that works with those of us in the South, not discounting the other areas, but understanding that we are right now, I think we're in the middle of a 3rd Reconstruction. Okay. So I think the first one was 1868 to 1898, the second was 1954 to 1968, and the third one began when President Obama was elected. But it wasn't him, it was the electorate. See, it was the kind of electorate that could break through in a southern state like Florida, or a southern state like Virginia, or a southern state like North Carolina, and vote for an African American to be president of the United States. It was broad, it was deep, it was multicultural, multiracial, multi-class. And that electorate scared the ultra-conservatives to death, because they recognized after that electorate, they didn't have any more control over the solid South. So what did they do? Immediately they started trying to deny voting rights.
Okay. If Dr. King were living today, how do you think he would feel, or what would he say about the present condition of the world right now?
I think he would be hurt that we're still fighting the battles. I think he would be hurt that 45 years after his death, North Carolina still has the same number of people in poverty that we had when he died. I think he would be hurt by the gross inequities that we continue to see in poverty. I think he would be hurt by the attacks on voting rights that Medgar Evers and and he and 4 little girls, 2 weeks after the March on Washington, gave their lives for. I think, but I think he would not be hindered. I think he would be challenging President Obama, but President Obama said that. He said he wouldn't just be supporting him. Dr. King always challenged every president. I think he would be disturbed by a continual commitment to war. You know, he was killed exactly 1 year to the day that he spoke in Riverside's pulpit about war. But I think, this is what I think, talking about a woman, I think Dr. King would again listen to Mahalia Jackson.
Oh.
And Mahalia Jackson was the one, when he was doing the I Have a Dream speech, he had not planned to say I have a dream. You know, he first delivered it in Rocky Mount and then in Detroit. And Mahalia Jackson had sung and she was standing behind him. And she felt, I guess his spirit being a little weak, and she said, Doc, tell him about the dream. And he kept on talking and she hollered again, Doc, tell him about the dream. And they say that at that point, he turned from his written notes, looked up, and he began to say, I have a dream. I think he would hear all of the voices off stage, the poor, the hurting, the children. He would hear us saying, tell him about the dream, and he would demand that we still fight for the full fulfillment of the dream that he had.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Barber, I want to thank you for being a guest on my show. I'm so honored.
Thank you so much.
I know you've been on my radio show before, but it's a pleasure to have you on my TV show now.
Thank you so much.
But I'd like for you to give the viewing audience maybe some contact information or something in case they'd like to call you or email you at this time.
Go to our website. First of all, join the Fayetteville branch. Join the Fayetteville branch. Secondly, go to our website, which is ncnaacp.org, and then text NAACP to 46988. 46988, and then text NAACP, and that will hook you up with thousands of people across the state who are still trying to tell North Carolina about the dream.
Okay, well, I thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you.
Viewing audience, thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk with Dr. Shanessa Fenner. See you next time.
Stranger, stranger, wait, hold up, don't run, I don't bite. Stranger, got me so very much hypnotized. Familiar stranger, stranger, wait.